The sky was quiet, too quiet, high above the Pacific, where the air thinned into silence and the horizon blurred into pale blue. A formation of American bombers moved steadily forward, massive silver shapes, each one carrying enough firepower to erase entire cities. The B-29 superfortress was unlike anything the world had ever seen. It flew higher, farther, untouchable, or at least that's what its crews believed. Inside one of those bombers, a young gunner pressed his face against the cold glass of his turret. Below him, the ocean stretched endlessly. Above him, nothing but empty sky. No fighters, no flak, no resistance. That was the unsettling part, because by 1945, Japan was desperate. Its cities burned, its navy shattered. Its air force, what remained of it, was a shadow of its former strength. And yet, something had changed. The Americans had started noticing it first, not in explosions, not in dogfights, but in something far more disturbing. Silence. At first, it was dismissed. Pilots reported fleeting shadows in the distance, shapes that didn't behave like aircraft, objects that appeared, lingered, and then vanished without a trace. No engine noise, no contrails, no radio chatter, just presence. One pilot described it like this: "It felt like something was watching us." Command brushed it off. Fatigue, they said, long missions, high altitude stress. But then the reports multiplied. Different crews, different squadrons, same description. Something was up there, and it wasn't playing by the rules of war. Back inside the bomber formation, the gunner shifted uncomfortably. His gloved fingers tightened around the controls. The sky looked wrong today. Not dangerous, not yet, but heavy, like a storm that hadn't arrived. He scanned the horizon again. Nothing. Then suddenly, a flicker, barely visible, low behind them. His breath caught. "Contact!" he shouted into the intercom. 6 o'clock low. Something's there. The crew snapped to attention. Guns rotated. Eyes strained. But by the time anyone else looked, it was gone. Miles away, hidden within the clouds, another aircraft drifted silently. It wasn't fast. It wasn't armed in the traditional sense. And it wasn't meant to return. Inside its narrow wooden frame sat a single pilot. No engine roared around him. No vibration shook the cockpit. Only wind. Cold. Thin wind slipping across the wings. The aircraft he rode wasn't built for survival. It was built for one thing only: impact. By this stage of the war, Japan had turned to tactics the world could barely comprehend. Not just kamikaze attacks. Those were already feared. This was something quieter, more calculated, more unsettling. A weapon designed not to fight the enemy, but to appear where it shouldn't be, to slip through the sky like a ghost, to strike without warning. The pilot adjusted his grip. His oxygen mask fogged slightly with each breath. Below him, far in the distance, he could see them, tiny silver dots. The bombers. The men inside them didn't know he existed. Not yet. He had been trained for this, or at least told he was ready. There had been no long flight hours, no complex maneuvers, just instructions. Simple, direct, find the target, approach unseen, do not hesitate, because hesitation meant failure, and failure meant disappearing into the ocean below, forgotten, back in the American bomber. Tension began to rise. The gunner couldn't shake the feeling. "Something's out there," he muttered again. But the sky remained empty, calm, unmoving. And that's what made it terrifying. Because in war you expect noise. You expect chaos. You expect to see the enemy coming. But this was different. This was something that turned the sky itself into a hiding place. The truth was, the Americans weren't facing a superior weapon. They weren't even facing a practical one. They were facing desperation. And desperation doesn't follow logic. It doesn't care about survival rates. It doesn't care about success. It only cares about one thing: trying anyway. The glider pilot leaned forward slightly. His eyes locked onto the distant formation. Wind rushed louder now. The moment was getting closer. There would be no second attempt. No turning back. No escape. Only a silent descent toward fate. And somewhere in the vast emptiness between sky and sea, hunter and hunted moved toward each other, one unaware, the other already committed. Because in the final days of the war, Japan had created something chilling, not just a weapon, but a mission where silence itself became the deadliest threat. And for the men flying those bombers, the worst part wasn't the attack. It was not knowing it was coming at all. The first real encounter didn't begin with an explosion. It began with confusion. Somewhere over the Pacific, a formation of B-29 Superfortress aircraft pushed forward through thin, icy air. The mission was routine now, long flights, high altitude, precise bombing runs. The crews had grown used to danger, fighter interceptions, anti-aircraft fire, even kamikaze attacks. Those threats made sense. They were loud, predictable, human, but what they were about to face wasn't. Check your six again. The voice crackled through the intercom. The tail gunner leaned forward, scanning the endless sky behind them. His eyes had adjusted to spotting movement, even the smallest flicker. At first, nothing. Then, there was again a shape, small, thin, almost fragile, not climbing, not diving, just gliding. Contact confirmed, he shouted. 6 o'clock, low, closing slow. The formation tightened. Guns rotated into position. Every man on board felt it instantly. That shift in the air when something wasn't right. The object didn't behave like a fighter. It didn't accelerate. It didn't evade. It didn't fire. It simply moved steadily toward them. "Where's the engine?" someone muttered. No one answered, because there wasn't one. Miles behind the formation, carried only by gravity and intent, the glider drifted closer. Inside, the Japanese pilot sat rigid, hands steady on controls. No noise to guide him, no vibration to feel. Just sight, just instinct, just the distant shape of the bombers growing slowly larger. This wasn't speed. It was patience. Back in the bomber, the tail gunner locked his sights. "I've got him," he said, "but something's wrong." "Take the shot," the pilot ordered. The gunner hesitated. The target was too still, too exposed, too easy. Then instinct took over. He fired. The sky shattered with gunfire. Tracers ripped through the air, slicing toward the silent glider. And for a brief second, it looked like it would be over instantly. But the glider didn't react like a normal aircraft. No evasive maneuver. No sudden turn. It simply shifted slightly, drifting just enough that the first burst missed. Not by skill, not by precision, but by something far more dangerous. Unpredictability. "Adjusting," the gunner shouted, firing again. This time, the tracers found their mark. Wood splintered. A wing tore. The glider shuddered violently. Inside, the pilot felt the impact. The frame around him cracked. Air screamed louder through the ruptured structure. But he didn't pull away, didn't hesitate, didn't even flinch. Because there was no plan B. He pushed forward, back in the bomber. "He's still coming," the gunner yelled, disbelief cutting through his voice. How is he still flying? The distance closed. Fast now. Too fast. Every gun in the formation opened up. Multiple streams of fire converged on the fragile aircraft. More hits. More damage. Pieces of the glider began to tear away, spiraling into the void below. But still, it came forward. And that's when the realization hit. This isn't an attack aircraft. A voice whispered over the intercom. "It's a missile." The words hung in the air. Cold, heavy, unreal. Inside the glider, the pilot's world was collapsing. The left wing barely held. Controls responded sluggishly. Wind roared like a storm. Blood trickled down his sleeve. But ahead, the bomber filled his vision now. Massive, unavoidable. He adjusted his angle, just slightly. That was all he needed. Back in the B-29. "Brake right. Brake right," the pilot shouted. The massive bomber struggled to respond. At that altitude, at that weight, it wasn't built for sudden escape. The glider closed the final distance. Seconds stretched into something unbearable. Then, a final burst of gunfire. One lucky hit. The glider's nose snapped sideways. Its trajectory shifted just enough, and it missed by meters. It tore past the bomber in a blur of broken wood and fabric, close enough for the crew to see the pilot inside. For just a fraction of a second, their eyes met. Then the glider spun out of control, falling, twisting, vanishing into the clouds below. Silence. No explosion. No victory. No closure. Just absence. Inside the bomber, no one spoke. The guns went quiet. The sky returned to stillness. But something had changed, because now they understood. This wasn't a weapon designed to succeed. It didn't need to. It only needed to get close enough to haunt them. And it worked. From that day on, every mission felt different. Every shadow became a threat. Every empty patch of sky, a hiding place. Reports continued. More sightings. More attempts. Most failed. Some never even reached visual range. But the effect was undeniable. Pilots began firing at nothing. Gunners reported targets that vanished before confirmation. Entire crews felt watched, hunted, even when radar showed nothing at all. Because the real damage wasn't physical. It was psychological. The idea that something could be out there, silent, invisible, already on its way toward you. And you wouldn't know until it was too late. That thought followed them into every mission, into every breath at high altitude, and far below, hidden in scattered airfields and makeshift launch points. More gliders waited, fragile, disposable, ready, and more pilots sat inside them, young, quiet, already knowing how their story would end, not with triumph, not with survival, but with a single, silent descent toward an enemy who might never even remember they were there. Because in the end, these weren't just missions, they were messages. A final, desperate signal from a nation running out of time, saying, "We are still here," even if only for a moment in the sky. By the time the war began to close in on its final days, the sky had changed, not in color, not in sound, but in feeling. For the crews of the B-29 Superfortress, every mission now carried something heavier than bombs. A question, one that couldn't be answered by radar or instruments or command briefings. Is something already out there waiting? They still flew. They still followed orders. They still climbed into thin air above the Pacific, where frost formed on metal and breath turned shallow. But something had shifted deep inside them, because once you've seen a man fly toward you knowing he will never return, you don't forget it. The reports kept coming in. Fragments of encounters, broken descriptions, pilots trying to explain something that didn't behave like war was supposed to. Small glider, no engine, came out of nowhere, didn't break off even under fire. Pilot visible, never turned away. Command documented it, filed it, analyzed it, but there was no clean category for what they were facing. It wasn't strategy. It wasn't innovation. It was something else entirely. Desperation had taken shape in the sky. And yet, for all the fear they created, for all the tension, the confusion, the sleepless nights, these silent weapons rarely changed the outcome of a mission. Most never reached their targets. Many disappeared before anyone even knew they were there. Some were lost to wind, distance, or simple miscalculation. And that's what makes their stories so haunting. They weren't effective. They weren't decisive. They weren't even remembered the way other weapons were. But they existed. And for the men who saw them, that was enough. Because war is not only fought with firepower, it's fought in the mind. And these gliders, these fragile, silent machines, they found their way into that space. Inside one returning bomber, after a long mission that felt longer than any before it, the crew sat in unusual silence. No jokes, no relief, no celebration. The tail gunner stared out into the fading sky, watching, waiting. Even now, he couldn't shake the image. That brief moment, when the glider passed by, when he saw the pilot. Not an enemy in the usual sense. Not a distant target. A person, close enough to recognize, close enough to understand. He never spoke about it fully. Not in reports. Not back home. Because how do you explain something like that? How do you put into words the feeling of watching someone choose not to turn away? Years later, when the war had ended, and the skies were once again just sky. Those moments lingered, not as victories, not as losses, but as questions. Who were those pilots? What did they think in those final seconds? Did they believe it would matter? Or did they already know that their mission would fade into silence? Just like their aircraft, history would move forward. New technologies, new conflicts, new stories of speed, power, and precision. And these gliders, these quiet, desperate attempts to change the course of something already decided, would slip further into the background, almost forgotten, but not entirely, because every now and then, in the pages of old reports, in the memories of those who were there, in the quiet spaces between well-known history, they appear again, not as weapons, but as reminders of what happens when war reaches its final edge, when options disappear, when logic gives way to something deeper and darker, a moment where the sky itself becomes silent, not because there is no danger, but because the danger no longer needs to announce itself. And somewhere far above the ocean, long after the last mission ended, you can almost imagine it, a lone shape, drifting, silent, unseen, not chasing victory, not changing history, just falling through it, and disappearing without a sound.